In lesson 3.4, we're going to work on multiplying rational numbers, and our learning progressions are what the objectives indicate here. You're going to apply your skills developed from multiplying integers to multiple rational numbers. So in lesson 2.1, you learn how to multiply positives and negatives together. That same work is going to continue. You're going to find the opposite of a number, how to go from positive to negative and negative to positive. When multiplying n negative numbers, n is representative of a number, where n is the amount of numbers, so whether you have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. The product will be positive if n is an even number. So by example here, I have -2 times -2, and that equals 4. So what we're showing here is that we have two numbers. Not the number 2, we have two numbers. So a negative times a negative is a positive. The product will be negative if n is an odd number. So -2 times -2 times -2, so we have three numbers there. So, of course, 2 times 2 times 2 is 8, and a negative times a negative times a negative is going to be a negative. So, a quick way to remember, if you have positive, the number of positives that you have is an even number, you're going to have a positive outcome, and if you have an odd number, you're going to have a negative outcome. So here we are at lesson 3.4, multiplying rational numbers, and over here, of course, is our standard that we're going to be focusing on, standard 2. About extending our previous understanding of multiplication, division, and of fractions for multiplying and divide. As we scroll down here, we have the essential question: how do you multiply rational numbers? Well, this is the same as in 2.1. So lesson 2.1. We're going to do the exact same thing. What's new is going to be how you're going to put in fractions and decimals into this. But as you can see here, a positive times a negative, you get a negative times a positive, you're going to get a negative. So that goes back to what we talked about at the beginning of the lesson there at the video. Come down here to example 1. Gina hiked down a canyon and stopped each time she descended 1/2 mile to rest. She hiked a total of 4 sections. What is her overall change in elevation? So we go and we highlight information, hike down a canyon, stop each time, 1/2 mile, okay? She hiked a total of 4 sections. What's her overall change? So the total sections, that's going to be a positive, okay? And she descended, so that's going to be negative. So we go ahead and write it down. We have 4 groups of -1/2. So they show you here on the number line on how to go do that. So we start at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're going down because it's a negative. So we go left on the number line, and it's in half mile increments, okay? So here, there's a step that they really don't show you, and I'm going to go over and I'm going to show you how we're going to do that. But we have 4 times -1/2. I want you guys to really get used to using fractions. I know it seems to scare everybody, but multiplying and dividing are really the easiest things. I think the adding and subtracting are a little bit harder than this. So first thing we want to do is we want to change this, which is a whole number, into a fraction. So you simply take the 4 and you put it over 1. Okay? You're going to go ahead and do the multiply, and you're going to keep the -1/2. Now, multiplying fractions, this is the easiest thing to do. You simply take the numerators, multiply across, take the denominators, multiply across. So 4 times 1 is 4. 1 times 2 is 2. And this is a positive, and this is a negative. So positive times a negative is going to give us a negative. Now you have to reduce this, okay? So reduce or simplify, however you want to call it. Both mean the same thing. So 2 goes into 4 twice. So our answer is going to be -2. So I wanted to highlight here about just taking fractions, and for multiplication, you just simply multiply across. You still keep in the rules that you had learned. So we had a positive times a negative equals a negative. A negative times a positive is going to equal a negative. A positive times a positive is going to equal a positive. And a negative times a negative is also going to equal a positive. So if they're the same, you get a positive. If they're negatives or opposites, you're going to get a negative. Now, back in the beginning of the video, I said that n, so we have here, we have two. We have two of these, two of these, two of these, two of these. So if we did a negative times a negative times a negative, and we said that that answer in the beginning of the video was going to be a negative, because we have three, 1, 2, 3. So if we go through the little trick here, I showed you a negative times a negative is a positive, because that's a rule right here. And then we bring him down. So a positive times a negative is going to equal a negative. So if n is 3 using negatives, you're going to get a negative answer. So you have your turn here, okay, where you're going to go ahead and do that. Here's your turn. So you're just going to simply take the 2 times the 3.5. So you want to go ahead and set it up 3.5, and that's a negative, times 2, okay, and then go ahead and do the math. You only have one negative, so negative times a positive is going to give you what kind of answer? You got two groups of negative 3.5, so you start at 0. You're going to have two groups of 3.5, 3.5. So you guys work that out and draw that. Moving on into the next section of multiplying rational numbers with the same sign. So now we're just doing what I already showed you. We have the positive times a positive gives us a positive. They're saying that P is the first number, Q is the second number. So if we used what we just had above us, and if we had 2 times 3.5, negative 3.5, this would be our P, this will be our Q. And when you have two things next to each other, that means to multiply, okay? So P times Q. But as we move into our pre-algebra phase, we don't use that multiplication sign anymore, because we learn that PQ means to multiply P times Q. Okay? So here you have another example, negative 2 times 3.5. So you go ahead and you do the math, okay, the way you set it up, you know, negative 3.5 times negative 2. Do your math. Negative times a negative, your answer is going to be positive. So you have two groups of negative 3.5. And if you recall, I showed you how this works back in the video for 2.1. So if you need a refresher, go back to video 2.1 and watch this. Because we have negative 3.5 groups, and we have two groups, so they show the two groups there. So since it's a negative 2, we're going to have to do the opposite, okay? Show you just a little bit different here in that they have you doing the 3.5 and then the 3.5, and then where you ended up here, and then they say take the opposite and go all the way here, where I've been showing you that since it's a negative 3.5 and then you do this, you would go 3.5 and then 3.5 to get the 7 there, okay? So either way works. The answer is going to be 7. So we have the your turn, okay? Go ahead and do that. What happens when you multiply more, multiplying more than two rational numbers? Well, if you go back to what I was just telling you a few minutes ago on the other screen, you simply multiply straight across, okay? So we're going to take 2 times 1 times 3. So 2 times 1 is 2, times 3 is 6. 3 times 2 is 6, times 5 is 30. We have a negative times a negative times a negative, so our answer is going to be negative. Because we have 1, 2, 3, so n equals 3, so it's going to be odd. Our answer is going to be odd. Okay? So they kind of show you another way that you can do this. I find this to be the simplest way. But again, if you want to go ahead and you want to cross out, they teach each one. So they do these two here, and that's what you got there. They come up with this answer, and then they come down and they do this, and they bring this guy down here, and then they do the same thing. Okay, so if 6 goes into 30 5 times, and 6 goes into itself 1 time, and the answer is negative, so it reduces to -1/5. So you have your reflect and your turns problems, and then you move on to guided practice. I hope this helps you out, and have a good day. Bye.